What is up, Internet? Today we're going to adjust the steering stem bearings on my 2011 YZ250. This is a pretty easy job, simple process. So you've got your lower triple clamp down here. You've got a steering stem that goes through the lower triple clamp, comes up through the head tube of the motorcycle. Here's your adjustment nut right here. And then you've got your upper triple clamp lock nut on top of that. We're going to remove the bar pad. We're going to remove the lock nut. We're going to loosen the two triple clamp bolts on the right side, and then there's two more on the left side, and that will free up the triple clamp. And that will allow us to tighten the adjusting nut. And essentially, as this threads down, it's going to pull the lower triple clamp and the steering stem up tight against the bearings on the top and the bearings on the bottom, and we'll get all the play out of the head tube. Okay, man, to check the play in the headset to see if it's loose, I'm going to leave the bike on the center stand, and then I'm going to grab the bottom of the fork, and I'm going to tilt the bike so that the rear wheel is on the ground and the bike's kind of resting against that. And then I'm just going to move the forks forward and backwards and feel for any play. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't know if that's going to come through the audio on my mic or not, but that's the play in the bearing. So we need to tighten that up. If you don't have a wrench large enough for this nut and can fit between the two bar mounts, then your other option is to remove these four bolts here, pull the bars up, and then use a socket. I'm not sure what the size is, but we'll find out here in a second. The main thing I wanted to talk about was the markings on your handlebars and these caps. There's a mark on the cap and there's a mark on the handlebar, and you want to make sure that you know what that is before you take them off so that you can put them back on in the same position. So when you go to ride your bike next time, everything feels the same as it does before you work on the bike. Okay, we've got the handlebars loose, right? We've got this we got this lock nut loose. We've got focus. I don't know if I like this. Let me switch this up. Stupid autofocus. All right, handlebars loose. Lock nut is loose. Now we are ready to use a punch and a hammer and tighten up the adjustment nut. Also, we've got our pinch bolts loose on both sides. So the triple clamp, the upper triple clamp is fairly free and loose, and we can go ahead and start tightening our steering stem. And so we'll tighten it a little bit. Then we'll use that method I showed you where we grab the bottom of the forks and push the bike so that the rear wheel's against the ground, and just kind of move the forks forward and backward to adjust or check for play. So let's do it. All right, I've got my handlebars torqued down back in the same spot that they were before. Should be pretty close. This mark on the handlebar was just below the mark on the clamp bolt, whatever this thingy's called. In the video, you might have saw me tightening one side, backing off the other side, and that was basically because I'm trying to get this gap and this gap to be fairly equal so that it's not, you know, pinched tighter on one side versus the other side. So I actually backed one off and then tightened this side back down, and same thing over here. Now, what I wanted to show you guys was I haven't tightened up the triple clamp, the upper triple clamp pinch bolts, because tightening the, what the hell is this thing called? Steering stem. Tightening up the steering stem actually pulls your forks up, right? So if you can imagine, your forks are clamped into the lower triple clamp down here, right? And your steering stem is popping up through here. If you thread this down, that's gonna pull all of this up. And the problem with that is now my forks are not aligned where they used to be. So let me focus, come on camera, you can do this. So you see this mark right here? This mark was aligned with the top of the triple clamp. So essentially, you know, that looks like a couple of millimeters, maybe 2.5 millimeters, maybe 3 millimeters, something like that. Essentially, the front of the bike is now going to actually ride lower, which will make it feel like it steers quicker, but it's also going to have a tendency to be less stable on the high speed chop because the front is just going to be tilted down more than it was before. And that may not seem like a lot, but I think that's going to depend on the rider and also the terrain you're riding on. So what I'm actually going to do, probably off camera, is just loosen up the lower triple clamp bolts, slide my fork tubes down so that the mark aligns with the upper triple clamp like it used to before. And that way I can just ensure that my handlebars are in the same spot, all the geometry of the bike is the same as it was before, and the bike should just feel like it did last time I rode it, minus the loose headset bearings, or steering stem bearings. Sorry, I keep doing that headset thing, but it's just my old BMX days. And just like that, we're done, man. It's super easy job. You don't need any special tools. I used a hammer and a punch, 32 millimeter socket. If you're having a hard time breaking that loose, or you don't have a wrench that fits in there, pull the handlebars off. Check your marks so that you can put your handlebars back in the same position that they came off in. Air compressor, air tool, 32 millimeter socket, and that comes right off super easy. Let's see, what else? I think that's about it. So I still have my upper triple clamp pinch bolts loose because I'm going to loosen the lowers, and I'm going to pull the forks back down so they're at the same height that they were before we tightened up our headset bearings. And you know, headset bearings isn't something that you should be doing often. If you're doing it too much, if they keep coming loose, there's something wrong. So we did a full rebuild on this bike. I'll put the playlist in the upper right hand corner, which I think is my left because I'm looking at the camera, right? Yeah, so that it'll be in the upper right hand corner, and it's a playlist for the whole rebuild. We stripped this thing down to the frame, so there's brand new bearings in there, and they just came loose after the first 3. I think I rode 3 times since the rebuild was really complete and the engine was broken in, the top end. Anyway, yeah, it's not something you should have to do very often, but if you do need to do it, that's how. And I think for the motocross bike, grabbing the bottom of the forks and tilting it so that the rear tire is touching the ground and just going back and forth to feel the play, that's about probably the easiest way to do it. You can also put the bike so both wheels are on the ground, take it off the stand and move it forward, hit the front brake, and you'll be able to feel any play. But I think on a motocross bike, the suspension has so much travel and it's so soft, it's kind of hard to feel it that way. Whereas on a street bike, it's pretty easy because there's not nearly as much suspension travel. The bikes weigh a lot more and the suspension just overall is a lot stiffer. So you can actually just roll the bike forward, pinch the front brake or grab the front brake and feel if there's play in the headset. It'll be really obvious. And then you can also go backwards and do the same thing. Go backwards, just roll it backwards, grab the front brake. And if there's play, you'll feel it, you'll hear it. And yeah, cool. Hope you guys liked the video. You know what to do now. Keep the rubber upside down. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.